Hello and welcome to our introductory series. Today's topic is CISA Foundation, starting your information system audit career. This intro session is set up to see if this course is right fit for you or for your team. Thank you for taking the time out and being here today. CCS Learning Academy is the professional training division of the CCS Global Tech, a 28 years old full service IT consulting firm. We help business to build their teams with skill tech professionals depending on their project needs. We also help them by upskilling, reskilling their workforce on the latest technology trends, professional development, and leadership training. We offer a wide range of innovative technology solutions, training, and career placements. My name is Rajbir Singh, manager at CCS Learning Academy, and I have been in technology and professional training sector for over a decade. I work with students, organizations, and leaders for their professional development. We will be running a live Q&A at the end of the webinar. So we have enabled our Ask a Question feature. It is on the bottom of your screen. If you have any question, just put them in there. Today, we have well-respected subject matter expert, trainer, and a speaker who is SOC manager with more than 12 plus years of IT experience and 8 plus of which is in security. He has held many different security plus related positions from engineering to manager. He is also seasoned training consultant. So please welcome Dragostin Siko. I will hand over to Dragostin now. Dragostin, you can take it up from here.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me well. So my name is Dragostin. I'm based in Sofia, Bulgaria. And today I will be your host for this session on the CISA certification. So just a few words about how this is going to be laid out today. So first, we're going to have a quick introduction. Then we'll talk a little bit about the benefits of the IT certification in general before we talk about the CISA in particular. So then we'll say a few words about the ISACA certifications because this is an ISACA certification. So for those of you who haven't heard about who they are, this is going to be useful for sure. And then we'll dig a little bit deeper into the CISA itself. So what it is, who is it for, who is it not for, and so on and so forth. So based on that, we'll obviously talk a little bit about the career perspectives that it offers, and then we'll also take a quick glance over the different CISA domains. So that'll be the domains of the CISA exam. So with that, we'll conclude with saying a few words about how relevant the certification itself is in the industry. So you can make an informative decision about whether this is a certification for you, or maybe this is the certification for you. So with all of this information, we hope that you'll be able to make this decision a little bit easier after this session. So as was already said, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask them. I'll try to answer them as best as I can. And again, I hope this session will be useful for you. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about myself. I've been around the industry for some time now. I've worked for different companies over the years, IBM, HP, VMware, and so on and so forth. Right now, I manage the Security Operations Center team of one of the companies in the crypto area. And I also like to teach. Occasionally, I have some classes in a university. I also teach classes online. And this is something that I do like to do. So it's one of the reasons why I'm here to begin with. Okay, so let's not waste any more time on that. And let's talk about, first of all, let's talk about IT certification in general. So, the audience here, we're assuming that it's a diverse audience, and it most certainly is. So for some of you, this may be the very first certification that you're even considering having. While for others, this may be, even the fifth or even 10th or even more certification that you're about to have. But regardless of where you are in your professional journey at this point, I do want to talk a little bit about certification. And the reason for that is because you're going to have two schools of thought, right? So for those of you who have been around this industry for some time, you've probably seen this already, right? So you're going to have some people, on one hand, you're going to have some people saying how, spending money or on certification is not worthwhile, and how it's just, feeding money into this, billion-dollar industry and so on and so forth. And on the other hand, you're going to have the people who are actually going to come to you with their success stories, where we're going to tell you how they've actually managed to progress in their careers based on the certifications that they have obtained. And so, as with most complex questions, there's not a straightforward answer to whether certifications are worthwhile or not. The answer, as it usually happens in life, is it depends, right? It depends. So if you ask me whether pursuing an ID certification is worthwhile, I'm going to tell you that it depends on the certification. What I can tell you straight out the bat is that the people who are denying, the value of ID certifications, they're wrong, and they're wrong for sure. But this doesn't mean that certifying in anything is worth the money and the time, right? So it definitely depends on what you do, whether this is relevant to your position, and so on and so forth. So I can tell you from my own experience that the certifications that I have obtained throughout the years, at least most of them, have definitely helped my career growth. But one of the reasons for that is because I tried to achieve ones that had value in them, right? So it's not true that it doesn't matter what you certify in, and it's also not true that all certifications are equal. So there are definitely ones that are more valuable than others. But one thing that I do want to say is that, um, you know, uh, a lot of people compare education with certification, and so they say, I prefer, being master in, information technology or whatever, as opposed to certifying. Other people say, well, I prefer certifying. What I can tell you is that the one big benefit of certifications over education is the fact that they're always current, they're always relevant to what's going on in the industry, right? Um, Recently, the Singaporean government considered actually having people retake their formal education after, let's say, 20 or 30 years, because they feel like if you complete your education when you're 20 or 22, 24, 20 or 30 years later, what you have learned during this time is not relevant anymore. So it makes sense to actually retake it. And this is where certifications come in. And this is why they're actually so valuable, because they get updated all the time, right? So if you take this exam, if you take the CISA now, this exam is going to be different than the exam that you're going to take 5 years from now, right? Because it's going to get updated. And it does get updated all the time in order for it to be current and to be relevant to the industry. All right. So if you're at that very first stage of your career where you're even considering whether certifications are worthwhile or not, my answer to you would be yes, they are. But it depends on the certification. Okay. Right. So, if we talk about certifications, there are basically two big categories that we can split them into. So the first category are the vendor-specific certifications. So here, we mean certifications like the ones that, for example, Cisco offers, right? Cisco are a big certification vendor for quite some time now. I have actually been Cisco instructor in one of their Cisco networking academies for the past 10 years or so. And you have other big companies who provide valuable certifications as well, right? Like, for example, AWS and Google and a lot of others, right? So the thing about vendor-specific certifications
is the fact that as valuable as they can be, they're always tied to that specific vendor, right? And so some people are going to come up and say, well, yeah, but if I potentially obtain all of the AWS certifications, I should be able to fairly easily transfer that knowledge over to Azure if I start doing Azure after that, right? And there's truth in that for sure, but as true as it may be, they're still specific to the to the content and to the knowledge of that specific vendor's products. Whereas on the other hand, you have the vendorless certifications, and these are certifications that most of the time are provided by companies who specialize in this area, right? So it's not like this big IT vendor saying, hey, why don't we make an academy, or why don't we come up with a few exams and ask people to start certifying in them? It's not like a side business for them, right? For these companies, certification is the main business. And here we're talking about companies like ISACA, who are actually the providers of the CISA exam. We're talking about companies like IC Squared, companies like EC Council, Offensive Security, and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of big names in this industry. And I'm not gonna hide the fact that yes, these are companies who are making millions out of certifying people, but this doesn't mean that they're not doing it in the right way either, right? It's because um, as I said earlier, it does matter what you certify in. And there are definitely differences between the different certification providers. So with that said, ISACA is definitely out there in terms of a big name in the certification industry, and we'll talk a little bit more about them in a minute. But what I do want to say here on this slide is that when you decide that you want to certify, don't just think about what you do right now in your job. Think about 1 year later, 2 years later, 3 years later. I think 5 years later is a bit too much these days. I honestly don't think that asking somebody on an interview, hey, how do where do you see yourself in 5 years? I don't see this as being relevant anymore because the dynamics of this industry are such that it's tough to predict even 1 or 2 years ahead. But if we stick to this cliche of where do you see yourself in 5 years, yeah, definitely ask yourself this question. And I think in that regard, vendorless certifications are providing something that vendor specific are not, and it's the fact that you could apply this knowledge everywhere, right? You could apply it to any company that you decide to work at eventually. And of course it's not black and white, right? It's pros and cons. Of course, if you let's say have a lot of AWS knowledge, and tomorrow you decide that you're going to apply for another company that does AWS, of course you could apply more easily the IT certifications that you obtained as opposed to the vendor specific certifications as opposed to vendorless certifications. But my point here is that there's big value in getting certified in vendorless certifications like the CISA, like the certifications provided by ISACA, and so on and so forth. Okay. And so back on this topic about less and more valuable certifications, keep in mind, and this is especially directed to those of you who haven't obtained any certifications yet, or literally at the beginning of their career or certification journey, or people who have decided to move into the IT industry from another industry. I have worked with a lot of people like that over the years, and I can tell you that most of the time they're even more ambitious than the people who have worked in the IT industry from day one, right after high school or after university. And so regardless of where you are in this journey, if this is your first certification, you're definitely considering the financial side of it, right? So it doesn't matter if your employer is paying for the certification. And it doesn't matter if you're paying for it yourself. Somebody's paying for it, right? So some money are getting spent, and so you're definitely asking yourself the question: am I spending it wisely if I decide to go for the CISA? So what I'm going to say here is that my personal take on this is it's always better to obtain one valuable certification as opposed to obtaining 2 or 3 less valuable ones for the same price. Honestly, I'm not and I think a lot of people in this industry share this view. I'm not a fan of people who are just working towards bumping up their LinkedIn profile or their resume with a long list of 20, 30 certifications, half of which aren't worth even the paper that they're, the content is printed on. So I think it's always better to, if you're paying for this yourself, it's always better to save up a little bit more, wait a little bit more, prepare a little bit more, but at the end of the day, go for a more valuable cert, as opposed to obtaining some low-level ones that nobody's gonna care for. I think one of the best measures of whether a certification is valuable or not, and I think a lot of you have probably come to this conclusion already yourselves, is to basically open a job board and look at the ads look at the job ads for the position that you're aiming for and see what certifications the companies are asking for. If you don't see whatever you have been certified in there, then maybe it's not valuable enough. But at the same time, if you see 2, 3, 5, 10, or even more job ads, all of them asking for the same certification or certifications, then maybe yes, this is definitely one that's valuable and one that you should go for. Okay. All right. And so just to wrap up this topic, the other thing that you should consider is the certification renewal process. And this is also usually a big difference between vendor specific and vendorless certifications. Because usually what a lot of the vendors do, what all of the IT companies like Cisco and the others do, is they, when you take the exam and when you pass it and obtain the given certification, they just ask you to retake it, after 2 or 3 years in order to keep being certified. And this is one way of doing things, right? This is one approach. But the other approach, and I find the other one, honestly, I find it a lot more granular and even more appropriate in some situations, is what the most of the vendorless providers do. They basically ask you to obtain this number of learning points, or CPEs as they're calling them most of the time, which is basically the number of hours that you have spent learning or studying new things over the past year or 2 years or 3 years. And then once you submit the required number of hours, then yeah, you could become recertified. So think of this as one of the big differences too between the different certifications. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about ISACA in particular, right? Let's talk about ISACA as a certification vendor. ISACA is a big name in this industry. Let's start with that. Anyone who has ever worked in the IT industry and who has even the slightest knowledge of IT certifications is gonna attest to that. And they're a very big name in auditing, in IT auditing certifications in particular. So don't get this the wrong way. I'm not gonna say how they're the best vendor out there or anything like that. For example, if you're somebody who is looking to to develop your skills more in the, let's say, the offensive security or the pen testing or the red teaming area, then the ISACA is probably not your vendor. But at the same time, if you're somebody who is in compliance or privacy, security in general and so on, then ISACA might just be the best vendor for you to go with. So one of their most popular certifications is the CISM. The CISM stands for Certified Information Security Manager. And this is definitely one of the most sought after certifications in this industry. So if you pull up a job board and look at the ads, for different positions ranging from security manager, chief information security officer, and even security analyst and engineer, there's a whole range of positions for which the CISM is a requirement in these job ads. And this is because, a lot of companies, I think most of the companies actually see the value in this certification. And one of the things, one of the requirements for a certification to be valuable is for it to be tough enough to obtain, right? For it to be hard enough to obtain. So the CISM is definitely like that. So it's not something that you could just go and get without, first of all, having a number of years in the industry. Second of all, having enough knowledge and having studied enough in order to pass the exam. So if we have to compare it with other certifications, other similar certifications, it's probably in the ballpark of the CISSP, which is a lot of people refer to it as the the gold standard in terms of IT certifications because it covers in IT security certifications in particular, because it covers a very, very broad range of topics, even though it doesn't go too deep into any one of them, but it's actually one of the hardest exams to pass out there. So the CISM is out there too, in the same ballpark, in the same area as the CISSP. So it's one of the most popular CISA certifications, and it's very appropriate for people who are security managers, people who are chief information security officers, people who have some number of years in this industry, right? So I would not recommend this as your first certification, right? If you're just starting in this industry, if you haven't taken any other cert so far, I would not recommend this one. This one is more appropriate for people who already have a number of years under their belt. Okay. So next you have the CRISC, which stands for Certified in Risk and Information Systems Control. This is a very specific certification, and it's very valuable because there aren't too many risk-oriented certifications out there. So this is actually an area where ISACA are very influential, and they're actually one of the few such companies who actually offer a risk-targeted certification. So if you're anything from risk manager, risk analyst, all the way to security manager, chief information security officer, or anything in that area, this would be an appropriate certification for you. This is also a certification that is appropriate for people who have a very well-established risk management structure in their company. So this is your way of understanding how risk management works to begin with in this industry. So it's a very niche and specific cert. Then you have the CDPSE. This is actually one of ISACA's newest certifications. They literally launched that a few years back. I can't exactly recall how many, but I think not more than 4 or 5 years back they launched this one, whereas the other ones are a lot older than that. So this is certification targeting privacy professionals, anyone working in the privacy domain. And privacy is a very specific area where it's actually at times it's actually the touching point between legal and IT security. So there aren't too many certifications in this area. So if you're familiar with this industry, you know that there's not a whole other certifications like this one. So if I had to compare it with something, I would compare it with the ones that are targeted towards US law, EU law, and so on and so forth. But it's a very niche one as well. So unless you're doing something in the privacy area, you probably won't go for the certification. All right. Then you have the CET, Certified in Emerging Technology. This is a certification which is getting popular. The last few years, it's targeting emerging domains in the IT industry. I'm not going to go into much detail around this one, but if you want, you can of course always check it out on ISACA's website. So it's targeting some very specific emerging domains in this area. The CSX cybersecurity practitioner, this is one that's more practically oriented. Keep in mind that ISACA certifications most of the time are test-based, right? So in order to pass the exam, you have to actually pass a test and answer a certain number of questions correctly in order to pass the test. This is one that's more geared towards practical skills. So you might want to check this one if you want something more hands-on in the security area. Okay, and then you have information technology certified associate. So this one is composed of certain let's call them sub certifications, or you actually have to pass a number of exams in order to obtain this certification. So it's not like pass this exam and grab the cert. No, you have to actually pass I can't recall exactly, I think 4 or 5 exams, and they're focused on different areas of the IT industry, right? So you have one focused on networking, another one focused on security, another one focused on computers or computing in general, and so on and so forth. So I think this one is more appropriate for somebody who is, for example, making the shift towards IT right now, right? So if you have been working in another industry so far, and at a certain point you decided, hey, I think IT is actually what I want to do, then going for this would be great for you, in order, for example, to to compensate for lack of any formal information technology education. So this is where ITSA fits in, and such certifications are getting very popular in the past years. IC Squared, one of the other big vendors in this area, they also launched one that was called certified in cybersecurity. I think it was the name. It's also an entry level one for people who do not have too much experience in IT in general, or security in particular. So this is one that you might want to consider if you're at this stage right now. Right. So let's delve into the CISA itself. So first of all, let's say a few words about auditing certifications to begin with. And first of all, what we have to say is that there are not too many of them out there, right? So there's not like a whole bunch of auditing certifications to pick from to begin with. So I can I can definitely say that if you're looking at obtaining one of the most valuable one of the most valuable auditing certifications out there, then CISA would definitely be a very good candidate out there. So auditing, and IT auditing in particular, is a very specific domain. I have worked as an IT auditor for a certain period of time, and I was actually a QSA. For those of you who know what this is when you're doing audits or assessments on the PCI DSS standard. So the reason why specific is because most of the time people go for the vendor-specific certification. So, for example, they become certified as an ISO auditor or an ISO implementer, or they become QSA. This is basically an auditor for the PCI DSS, and there aren't too many vendorless auditing certifications out there that actually cover what IT auditing is to begin with. And this is exactly where the CISA comes into play. So this is where you have to consider why this would be valuable to you in particular. So there are a lot of different reasons for that. Now, we're going to talk about this a little bit more, in a moment. But the most important question for you is for you to ask is, what am I going to get in return if I pass this exam and if I obtain this certification? This is exactly what I'll try to answer, in the next minutes. But, why I'm saying this is because if you're just looking to obtain any kind of cert, if you're at the point of your career where you're saying, I just want to get certified, it doesn't really matter what I get certified into, then the CISA is probably not for you, all right? But if you are in this industry looking for ways to excel in your auditing career, or if you are somebody who is in a position that actually requires this knowledge, then the CISA would definitely be of value to you. And we'll see why this is true in a moment. So this is exactly what we'll talk about here. Who is it recommended for and who is it beneficial for? So first of all, the most obvious answer here, being an IT auditor. So if you're an IT auditor, there are pretty much two ways you could be doing this. One is if you're looking for a company, that's doing this as a service, right? You're an audit provider. So you're a company that audits other companies in order for these companies to, for example, become certified in a certain IT standards like ISO or PCI DSS and so on and so forth. So if you're doing that, then I think the CISA is recommended, to say the least, for you to obtain. Actually, if you want to become a QSA, a qualified security assessor, this is a person who is performing audits on the PCI DSS standard. Becoming CISA certified is actually one of the requirements. And they're not directly saying you need to obtain the CISA, but they're saying you need to pick from a list of auditing certifications. And again, like I said, there aren't too many of them out there. So, passing the CISA is very, very recommended for you in this situation, for example. So this is the first scenario, right? The second scenario is if you're working for, let's say, a very big company that actually has its own auditing department, an internal auditing department, then in this case, again, you're going to be an auditor, but you're going to be an internal auditor for the company that you're actually working for. And this is very popular, let's say, with banks, with government institutions, and with other sorts of companies that for which this is very essential, to have such a department, to have such positions inside the company. So if that's the case, then again, the CISA will be very relevant to you because it's going to teach you the very basics of what auditing looks like. And at the same time, it's also going to touch base on a lot of the domains that you need to be proficient in order to become a good auditor. And in a moment, I'll also talk about what to expect and what not to expect from the CISA certification. So these are the two most common scenarios for people looking to become CISA certified. And here, what I want to say is that this doesn't mean that this encompasses everything, right? So if you don't fit into one of these two scenarios, this doesn't mean, and I want to emphasize on that, this doesn't mean that the CISA is not relevant to you or to what you're doing. Why? Well, because you might as well be on the other end of the auditing process. You might not be the one performing the audits, but you might be the one getting audited. So in this case, it definitely makes sense for you to understand what this whole process looks like. In a lot of companies, people have this wrong mindset that auditors are like the enemy or the people that we need to be afraid of because who knows what they might uncover. And of course this is the wrong mindset. Auditing is very essential, and it's going to get even more essential down the road. For those of you who pay close attention to international regulations on IT security, you've probably noticed that in the past 5-10 years, they're only getting more, and there are more and more regulations being created on regarding security. So and IT in general too, but mostly regarding the IT security part of it. So because of that, compliance, auditing, privacy, information security in general, all of these domains are going to become even more relevant down the road. So having such knowledge, obtaining such knowledge is something that, if you do that, you're definitely going to be investing in your future, regardless of which end of the auditing process you are at. The other thing is, the other scenario would be if you're a young professional, somebody who is just starting their career, and you're thinking, okay, so maybe right now what I'm doing, my job right now is I'm at in a customer support department, or I'm a junior systems admin or a junior developer or anything like that. So if you have aspirations of becoming an auditor, or if you have aspirations of becoming a manager, a security manager, an auditing manager, or even a chief information security officer, then obtaining the CISA is definitely a milestone that you need to be thinking about. There's this thing about these certifications like the CISA that they do have experience requirements attached to them. And I talked about this earlier, right? So in order to obtain the certification itself, you don't have to only pass the exam, but you also have to have a certain number of years doing what this certification is about. All right. And they do show, lessen these requirements in case, for example, you have, you obtain a bachelor's degree or a master's degree in this area. Then, for example, they say, okay, so instead of having 4 years of experience in this area, we're only going to ask that you have 2 or 3 because we see that you have this formal education that's relevant to what you're doing. But my point is that this shouldn't discourage you from taking the CISA exam in case you do not possess the required number of years right now. This is very important, and I want to emphasize on that. A lot of people are, they're saying, what's the point in passing the exam if I'm not gonna be able to get the cert in the next year or two, for example? And I'll answer this straight away. The point is that you could always list on your, on your resume or your LinkedIn profile or whatever, you could always say that you have passed the CISA exam. You could always say that you have passed the CISSP exam. You could always say that you have passed the CISM exam. And this is going to bring a lot of value to your resume, regardless of whether or not you have the certification, the actual certification yet. And this is true for a lot of reasons. Now, in my job and in some of my previous jobs too, I was in the position of a hiring manager, so I had to hire people for my team. And I can tell you that from being in this position and having this perspective, I always I always preferred asking applicants to come to an interview, applicants who had shown some effort in their years of work in this industry. And by effort, a lot of the times what this means is that they have either passed a certain exam, obtained a certain certification, or anything like that. Okay, so think of it this way: if you have 2 people applying for the same position, they have the exact same number of years of experience in doing exactly what you're asking from them to have in terms of experience, but one of them has let's say the CISA certification and the other one doesn't, and let's say that they're both applying for the position of, let's say, a security manager or an auditing manager or a chief information security officer. I think it goes without saying that the person having obtained this certification is going to get, they're going to have more points, to put it this way, compared to the other person. And I can give you an even more extreme example. You could have somebody with 5 years of experience doing the same thing without any certifications. And you could have somebody, let's say, with 2 or 3 years of experience who has obtained, let's say, the CISA. In this case, I'll definitely think twice before asking, the first guy or only the first guy to an interview, because the other guy has shown the potential of advancing in their career, of investing the time and money in developing themselves. So this is actually the differentiator, right? So what I'm trying to say is that even if you don't possess the required number of years today, don't this shouldn't discourage you for going for the exam, because you could go for the exam any given day. And in order for you to obtain the certification, you have to have the number of years, but this doesn't mean that you cannot start studying for the exam today. Okay. And this is important because you shouldn't get discouraged by requirements. You shouldn't get discouraged by the fact that you might not be able to jump straight onto the cert right away, right? So think of it as showing the fact that you have made this effort as opposed to actually obtaining the end goal or the final price or whatever you want to call it, which is the actual certification. Okay. All right. Okay, so let's go real quick through some of through all of the CISA domains, and say a few words about each one of them. So as you can see, ISACA on their website, they have listed, and you could of course go through this yourself after the class, but they have told you, what's the weight that each one of these domains has when it comes to the exam. So you could actually see what percentage of the overall exam each one of these domains is taking. Okay, so the first domain is called information system auditing process. Now here the content is all around the types of controls that are part of an IT audit, the types of audits, the types of assessments that are out there. This is like the A and B of information system auditing. So if this is new area to you, if this is something that you haven't done before, this would be where you're gonna get your A and B in this area, right? So and one thing that you're gonna notice about the way ISACA has structured the CISA domains is that they're always composed of two parts, right? So for domain one, the two parts are called planning and execution, right? So in the planning area, you have things like processes, controls, audit planning, types of audits, and so on and so forth. Whereas in the execution part, you have things like sampling methodology, evidence collection, quality assurance of the auditing process itself, and so on and so forth. So let me give you an example with just one of these topics, just so that you could grasp a little bit more from what they're about. So let's say sampling methodology. So what is a sampling methodology? Now, for any one of you who has performed an audit before, you know that this is one of the most important parts of the whole auditing process. So when you perform an audit, you actually have to prove that the entity that you are auditing has sufficiently, passed all the requirements for them to become, let's say, certified in a given standard, or if they're compliant with a given regulation, and so on and so forth. So the sampling methodology is basically how, the mechanism that you use in order to pick enough samples from their environment in order to prove that they are either compliant or that they're not with let's say the given standard that you're auditing them against. And this is important because especially in very big, in very large environments, the sampling methodology, the way you choose it, the way you actually execute it is very important, because let's say that you're auditing a company like I don't know, IBM, a very, very big company. So you're gonna get, you're gonna drown in the amount of information and systems and people and processes that they have, unless you have a good sampling methodology in order to be able to sample just enough from their environment in order to draw conclusions about whether they're compliant or not. So so this is something that you're going to study in this domain, in domain one of the CISA. Okay. Next on, you have domain two, and domain two is called governance and management of IT. So here, here you learn about what IT governance is, what IT strategy is, how they're interconnected. You're gonna study about the organizational structure. You're gonna hear the term enterprise architecture, which is something that it's a whole, let's say it's a whole separate science that you're just going to see a little bit from it here in this domain. Maturity models are also covered here, and basically all sorts of laws, regulations, and standards that could affect a given organization. So this is all the governance part of this domain. And then you have the second part. We talked about how each of these domains has two parts. The second part is called management. And in the management part, it's going to be topics like information technology, service provider acquisition, management, performance monitoring, reporting, quality assurance, quality management. This is all here in the management of IT part of this domain. Now, as you notice, this domain is not that well represented on the exam. It's only 17% out of the overall exam content and certification content, but it doesn't in any way means that it's less important than the others. They're just giving you these percentages so that you could expect, so that you have a good idea of roughly how many questions you're gonna have from each domain when you take the exam. Okay. All right. And then you have domain 3, which is called information systems acquisition, development, and implementation. This is only 12%, but again, do not underestimate. This is actually a mistake that a lot of people are making. They're saying, okay, so this is only 12% out of the overall grade or the overall size of the exam pool of questions, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Don't do this mistake because it might as well be the differentiator between you passing or failing the exam. It is actually the amount of questions that you have on this particular domain. Okay. All right, so this here is more about how the whole information technology area relates to the business, because it's always about the companies being able to do what they're doing and doing it in the best way possible, and IT is supposed to be a contributing factor and not a blocker in that regard. So here the two parts that this domain is composed of are first, acquisition and development, where it's going to be things like system development methodologies, control identification and design, and so on and so forth. And the second part is the one that's called information systems implementation, where you'll hear about testing methodologies, system migration, infrastructure deployment, and so on and so forth. These are all topics that you need to be familiar with, not on a super deep level, but you need to be familiar with them in order for you to be a good auditor. Okay. And then you have domain 4, which is information systems operation and business resilience. So here, it's one of the better represented domains in the syllabus. So it's 26%. Here, the two parts are called information systems operations and business resilience. So in the first part, the topics here are incident and problem management, a very big topic. This is actually something that all of you who have, let's say, passed anything ITIL related will be familiar with. ITIL, you probably know this, it's a very popular service management framework. It has a lot of certifications, part of it. The ITU Foundation is the most basic one, but it basically tells you how the whole IT machine is working on the back end. Change management, configuration management, release management, patch management, all of this is covered here. Data governance, this is all part of the information systems operations part of this domain. The second part, the business resilience part of the domain, here you'll hear some very popular abbreviations, in the IT industry, like BCP, which stands for Business Continuity Plan, DRP, Disaster Recovery Plan, Business Impact Analysis, BIA, which is the input for some of these processes, and so on and so forth. So this domain or this part of domain 4, I think this is something that every single person in the IT industry should be familiar with, because regardless of what your exact role is, you are part of these processes in one way or another, right? So definitely do not underestimate the importance of this domain. Okay. All All right, and then you have domain 5, which is protection of information assets. By the way, these percentages might slightly change because ISACA is in the process of updating the CISM exam. So you might see them going up or down by a percentage or two every now and then, but it's still going to be in the same ballpark, right? So domain 5 is called protection of information assets. And here this is the domain that's mainly focused on, IT security, privacy. It's basically the things like the CIA triad, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, data classification, encryption. These are the more technical topics here in this domain. But again, there are topics that you need to be familiar with in order to succeed as an auditor. And here it's also about understanding what security event management looks like, security testing, security monitoring, incident response, which is like a world of its own. There are people who are they're doing this for a living, being incident managers, incident responders, and so on and so forth. Okay, so this is basically domain 5. Okay, so now we've come to the one of the most important parts of this presentation, which is how is the CISA relevant? Now, first of all, don't forget that we're talking about the information security part of the game, right? So we're talking about the CISA, the CISM, all of these exams, they are just focusing on different aspects of the same thing, right? So one is focusing on how you're auditing all these systems, the other one is focusing on how you're securing them, but cybersecurity and information systems auditing, they're not opposing topics. They're actually part of the same core. It's just different angles of it, right? So in that regard, the CISA is definitely relevant, and it's going to become even more relevant as we talked about how information security regulations, standards are just evolving day by day and year by year. So I don't see the importance of this certification lessening in the years to come. It's actually going to be the exact opposite. So if you want to, if you're hesitating whether this is, so let's say that you're very interested in this area, right? You're very interested in these topics. You want to become an information systems auditor, for example, or an IT auditor. And you're very, you're very interested in the security part of it as well, but you're hesitating whether this is a job that would offer you something in the future. I think you shouldn't hesitate about this at all. I think a lot of you have heard about this hunger, in the past years for qualified people in the IT industry, in the security industry, and it's also the same for the auditing industry. If you want to, put it as a separate industry, even though auditing is a separate one to begin with. So investing in that will definitely be investing in your future for sure. So there's a growing demand for qualified people in this area, and it's not like there aren't hundreds and even thousands of job ads out there looking for people just like you, in case you are interested in this, right? So the auditing domain in particular, as I told you, there are not too many auditing vendorless certifications out there. So the CISA definitely stands out. Um, there are some competing ones, but I think one could easily say that the CISA is the most respected auditing vendorless certification out there. And I'm emphasizing vendorless because the ISO and the PCI DSS, they have their own certifications, but they're vendor specific, right? Because these are vendors, if you think about it, because ISO, this is a specific standard. PCI is a specific standard. It's a whole separate organization, actually. So from the vendorless certifications in the IT auditing industry, the CISA is definitely standing out. So, so this is basically the last slide. I just want to say a few more words before we get into the Q&A section. So one question that people are always asking is how many questions should I expect on the exam? And I'm going to answer this beforehand. So the CISA is composed of 150 questions, and what they're giving as a passing score would be for you to have a minimum of 450 out of 800 points in order to pass the exam. So it's not a very high threshold, but the CISA is also not a very wide exam to pass. So you need to sit down and study it for sure. And just one last sentence before we move into the Q&A session. If you have any hesitation about the CISA, and it's coming from whether it's gonna pay off, I think, you know, it's very unlikely for it not to pay off for you if you are in this industry, right? If you're an auditor, it's gonna pay off for sure. If you're a manager, a security and auditing manager, it's gonna pay off for sure. Now, if you're somebody who is just starting their career right now, it's gonna pay off down the road. And have no hesitation about that, because it's one of the most respected ID certifications out there. I can tell you this for sure. All right, so let's move into the Q&A. I don't want to take up all the time and not leave any time for questions. So let's move into the into the questions and answers part.
All right. Thank you, Dragostin, for the great presentation and your valuable information. Now I request to the audience, please pop in your questions. If you have any question, please feel free to ask. Our instructor, Dragostin, will answer all your questions. Dragostin, let me see if we got any questions.
Yep.
No questions yet. Okay, we will give some more time. Let us know if anyone have any questions. Dragostin, meanwhile, I would like to know more about exam pattern and what kind of questions candidate can expect, and like what is like how many questions should be and right questions to get passed, the scoring pattern, maybe anything you can highlight on these.
Yeah, I've already mentioned that, but so it's 150 questions, and so they have different points assigned to each one of them.
Okay.
They're not disclosing, the exact specifics of how many points each question has, but you need to obtain at least 450 points out of 800 in total in order to pass the exam. Now, something important that we do need to mention is about how much the exam costs. So it costs less if you're a member of ISACA. So it costs $575 for ISACA members, whereas if you're not a member, it costs $760. And for those of you who are hesitating whether it makes sense to become a member, I'll definitely encourage you to become members of ISACA, because they offer some great content for members. You get discounts, you get a lot of stuff. So, and you're also gonna get lesser prices on future exams as well.
All right. Thank you, Dragostin. Let me have a final check if we have questions from the audience. I think we are done up with the questions. If anyone have any question, you can reach us on the email. We will reach you back with all the details. Thank you, Dragostin. We have done up with the questions. And again, thank you for your time today. I have a special offer announcement. We are running a special offer on CISA certification course and also on few more courses. This is the industry's ever big discount. It is the premium discount. To know more, you can visit on our website. Me and my team will also send you the email. You can reply us back. If in case you have any friend or colleague looking for the training, you can also suggest them. I have also added my LinkedIn profile and company details. If anyone want to know more, can connect with me directly. So when it comes on upskilling and reskilling, CCS Learning Academy is designed to be your organization's secret weapon. A network of talented and passionate professional instructors are ready and waiting to work directly with you and your team. If you are new to IT or seasoned professional, we offer a wide range of courses for your needs. If you need more information, please contact us. on behalf of CCS and our instructor Dragostin, we would like to thank you for your attention on this important training session today. Hope you enjoyed the session. Looking forward to you all for joining our future webinars. Stay safe out there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.